Hello and welcome to another episode of Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. Today I shall be doing a makeover on this magnificent Matchbox miniature version of a Shand Mason horse-drawn fire engine, which came out in 1960. Now these models came out in a number of different variants. For example, the sticker on the side on this one says London Fire Brigade. There was also a Kent Fire Brigade version. The men sometimes had gold helmets and other times they were just plain black. And the horses were either white with a grey mane or they were black horses with a white mane. And not only that, the pump at the rear could be silver or gold. The boiler, however, was always gold as far as I know. This particular model came all the way from the UK from a guy called Andy Edwards. So Andy, if you're watching, thank you very much. Without you, this video would not be taking place. So let's have a quick look at this and see what I've got to work with. The two guys on the back have their heads missing. The boiler's loose. There's no drawbar on the front or horses. The driver's missing. There's a few paint chips. And the decals obviously need to be renewed. The wheels seem okay. It's a good paint job too. Just having a look underneath there, you can see made in England. But I can't actually see the number Y4 on it. Not only did Andy send me this fire engine, he also sent me a second one of the same type and in different condition. This one, for example, has a silver boiler as opposed to the gold one on the other model. All of the crew are missing. But this does have a drawbar, even though it's broken on the tip. So I'm hoping to create one model from these two and end up with a beautiful display model for my cabinet. So first up, I have to remove the wheels. And to do that, I'm going to use this little tiny cylindrical diamond dusted Dremel device to grind off the flared ends of the axles. So very carefully now I am grinding away. I'm holding the spoked wheel with my left thumb to hold it away from the rotating tip of the Dremel so it doesn't get damaged. That seemed to go okay, so now for the second one. Only takes half a minute this. If you haven't got one of these Dremels, you could probably just use a small file and carefully work your way around the end of the axle. I haven't really removed quite enough there. So I'll do it again. Quite nerve-wracking really, because you could very easily ruin these wheels with the tip of this rotating grinder. Still, that seemed to go okay. No damage there, which is good. Now I've got to work out how to pull this apart. There's one rivet in the base there that I can see, so that's a good start. And I'm guessing the drawbar is riveted in with its own rivets. So using the appropriately sized drill, I just take the top of the rivet off there like normal. Now today, for something different, I don't want to drill too far down through that flat plate that's the rivet goes through, because I won't be able to put this thing back together if I do that. So I'm leaving it deliberately a little bit tight, and I'm using this spring-loaded nail punch to pop the rivet out, the one that I've worn down, pop it out of the hole without making the hole too big, so I can put it back together again quite easily, hopefully. And here's those two little rivets that I knew would be there, holding the drawbar on. And these are very, very fiddly. Look at that in comparison to the size of that toothpick. You can see that they're very small. And all I'm doing is removing the barest minimum amount of metal there that will allow me to separate the drawbar from the base. So I'm pushing my luck here. I didn't really remove much at all, but again I'm using this spring-loaded center punch, and it is just smashing that through the hole like a very accurate sort of hammer strike, if you will. And it's come out quite cleanly. And I know it's early in the game, but I'm happy with that already. Things are going my way. To drill this center post, put it back together, I've supported this part of the model on a spanner to help me gauge a vertical drill. I want to go straight down if possible. So if I hadn't had that spanner there, the angle of this part of the body would be slightly tilted forwards or backwards, whichever way you look at it. And I could possibly have drilled through on an angle. So I managed to get it straight through. There's the tiny little bit of metal that you remove to make room for a screw to go in there. I'll just get that. Oh, that was half of it actually. Here's the other half stuck in the end of the drill. Tiny little drill, by the way. And there's the bits that I drilled out. For comparison, there's a match head there, so you can see it's not a lot of metal. After that, I managed to cut a thread, and using a 2M Allen headed bolt there, make this thing ready to go back together. Already got that screw in, which is good. Put some of this fast acting quick strip in there to take the paint off so I can repaint it. No good trying to paint over the old paint because you will see it obviously where the chips were. Unless you put a really heavy coat on. And then of course you'd be hiding the details on the actual cast metal. We don't want that. We want to preserve this and make it look as good as it can look. You can see how this paint stripper works really, really well. It's great. Even takes the decals off, which is strange. I don't quite understand the science of it. Somehow the paint stripper penetrates the decal and takes the paint off underneath the decal, which doesn't kind of make sense really, but seems to work. 9 times out of 10 anyway. It's great. I'll just scrub these up with a little toothbrush in some warm soapy water, and as you can see there's not one little iota of paint left on these things, which is great. It means I can undercoat them and paint them up again. Now this thing here is going to be a problem, that broken end of the drawbar there. I'm a little bit nervous to tell you the truth about fixing that. This little boiler here from the back looks a bit tarnished, so I'll give that a polish. And these wheels are going in the ultrasonic cleaner with the boiler to try and get rid of any gunk that might be wedged in the spokes of the wheels and attached to the details of the casting of the boiler there. I'm hoping that this little thing, it's like a jewellery cleaner, it can make these things look slightly better than they do now. So I placed the parts in this little jam jar that's actually got the cleaning product in it. That way I save on the cleaning product because I don't have to fill the machine with all that special solution. I just fill it with the water, and the sonic waves, or the ultrasonic waves, transmit through the water, through the glass, and to the components that are being cleaned. That's the theory anyway. What I do know is that they come out looking a little bit cleaner, and the sky blue cleaning fluid looks grubby after it's done its stuff. There you go, you can see it's all grey and mucky looking. I'm going to fish these out and have a look at them. Put the lid on, keep the dust out of that machine. So these have got cleaning solution on them, so I'm putting them on this paper towel, drying them off. So I can give them a better inspection. Let's have a look. Wow, they look quite amazing. There's no fluff or gunk or anything, dust, contaminants, whatever you could call it. They look very, very clean. As for the boiler, looks pretty much the same. I guess the plating there is worn off over time and is resistant to the cleaning product. I notice at close magnification there's some little words on here. Any idea what they say? Let's have a look. Shand Mason Company. It's amazing. Such detail on this little boiler, even like a pressure gauge there. So all these little bits here I'm going to paint. So my original plan was to have this boiler as the original colour, which was silver. So I cleaned it up with some metal polish to see how good I could get it looking. As for these wheels, I'm going to wash them to get the cleaning solution off. And I'm going to spray them a similar dark silver. I'm going to mix up some of this SMS paint. 50-50 mix of the silver and the black to make like a metallic grey. And I'm just going to give them a quick spray of this and hopefully they will look better for it. And I mixed this paint up about an hour ago and I put it in this. I was keeping it fresh in these two shot glasses by having one inverted over the other and sealing them with tape. So it doesn't take me more than 10-20 seconds to spray these wheels. It takes longer to clean the spray gun than it does to paint the wheels. The reason I didn't use a brush is because I didn't want any brush marks being apparent on those spokes, etc. And I'm sure under this magnification you would see any brush strokes that were made. So it's always better to spray it if you've got the little airbrush there available. To repair this drawbar, I have sourced a little bit of pot metal, or whatever you want to call it, off of a Matchbox stake truck chassis that I had. And I'm using this metal to try and repair this drawbar. So I heat up the part very gently with this tiny little blowtorch. And then just as it's ready, I touch it with some muggy weld. And the muggy weld will run where the flux is. And only where the flux is. If I don't put the flux there, it won't make a proper join. It looks a little bit unsightly at this stage, but I'm hoping to grind it down and make it look acceptable. So these are all the things I used: the helping hands, the muggy weld and the blowtorch. I'm just grinding the tip of it off and I'm holding the part nearest to the original shaft with the pliers so that there's no vibration from the cutting tool going through and might make it break off. After a little bit of filing and cleaning, I give it a coat of undercoat just to see how it looks. Looks not too bad. Now I also undercoat the other parts of the model at this stage. And I'm looking at the detail now, and I notice there's a few things here. There's a boiler underneath, boiler tank I guess. There's a little step at the back with grooves in it, but some nice leaf spring detail on the side. So I've got to paint this red. Obviously it's a fire engine, and I've chosen this Tamiya X7 red as my colour choice. I felt that out of all the reds I had, it was the closest to the original colour. Just having a look at these. I'm just having a quick look at these primed parts, primed with the Tamiya Fine Primer. And again, I'm admiring the detail that the Matchbox engineers or designers have built into their little models. It's time to paint the model. So here I am using that Tamiya X7 red. It's thinned down and I'm using the airbrush to paint them. Using the airbrush to paint the parts. It doesn't take very long to do, and I'm quite excited. Everything seems to be going according to plan so far. So far everything seems to be going according to plan. I hang the parts up there on those magnetic clips to dry, and afterwards I give them an inspection. And I'm not too happy with what I see. There seems to have been some kind of contaminant. Now I'm not too sure what it was, or whether it's the fact that I mixed up the paint too thin, but the paint job is absolutely abysmal, and I have to restrip the model, reprime it and paint it again. But I've ran out of red paint, so I'm going to have to resort to using the Mr. Colour 385, and that means mixing it up with a different type of thinner, and for good measure I'm putting in a splash of levelling thinner. So I'll show you how that turns out later on. Meanwhile, I am now turning my attention to the horses, and I've ordered some replica horses from Recover Toy, which is an Australian model parts supplier, reproduction parts. And the horses are pretty damn good, I think. A little bit of flashing there that has to be ground away. This is the right horse, so they have two separate castings, one for the right and one for the left horse. Here's the left horse. And they're very, very detailed and very well done. I'm quite pleased. I mean, obviously, there's some cleaning up to be done, but overall, they seem more than suited to the purpose. They look really, really good. Strange thing this, though, the left-hand horse will stand up and the right-hand one won't. So, I'm not too sure why that is. Something to do with the positioning of the feet, I think. I've also got some decals and a set of plastic firemen. Now, the original model came out with metal and plastic firemen, so I'm going with the plastic because that's all that's available. I downloaded the picture off the internet of a complete model to get an idea of how to paint the horses. And whilst I'm looking at it for the very, very first time, and I kid you not, I notice that there's a part missing off the back of my fire engine. And it looks like it must be a pump, a fire pump. And I'm hating myself at the moment because I thought everything was going so well, and then I realised I got a major component missing. So I quickly jump online again to recovertoy.com and see if they have a replacement part, and they actually do have one. And they only come out in gold. So I'm going to have to change the colour, my colour choice of the boiler to gold, and order one of the gold ones from Recover Toys. So I'm going to do that now and hope it comes before the end of this video. And I must admit, I'm not that optimistic that it will. So when that pump comes, it's going to be gold because that's all they are. They don't do them in silver as far as I can tell. So I'm now painting my boiler gold to match the gold pump that I've ordered. And the Tamiya gold goes on actually quite thick. You can still see 95% of the details though, which is good. I'll just leave that to dry, and now I am sharpening a matchstick, not because I'm bored, but because I need something to hold these horses with whilst I'm painting them. So I think these are ideal. That seems to work well. But before I paint them, I have to address that excess metal flashing that's on the legs and underbelly of these models. Just using a very, very small fine file from out of my collection of small fine files, I file off the flashing. So because these horses are going to be white, I've decided to paint my horses white, and therefore I'm going to use some Tamiya fine white primer. Whilst that's drying, I thought I might inspect for the first time these three little firemen that I ordered at the same time as I ordered all of the other parts. They're very detailed and exactly like the originals, and I'm very, very pleased with the quality here. Once again, there's a little bit of sprue left over that I shall cut off with a craft knife. But overall, these are good to go out of the box. The only thing is I'd like to add a little bit of pizzazz to my model, so I'm going with the option of the gold helmets. I'm using ink from a gold pen, I like it because it's very free flowing, as opposed to some of the metallic paints that can be quite gluggy to put on. The ink seems to go on a lot easier for me. Just takes a little bit longer to dry than normal. Eventually, here are all of the parts that are painted and ready to go back together. I've come up with a sort of an action plan, and the first part of the action plan is to put the wheels back on. So now I'm taking a trip out to my shed where my drill press is. My dogs think it's feeding time, but they're quite wrong. I don't feed them during the day, only in the morning and at night. The big white one is Ziggy, and the smaller black one, black and tan one, is Finn. So if you haven't watched my Matchbox videos before, this is the method that I use to put the wheels back on and prevent them from falling off the axles that I ground the end off at the beginning of this presentation. What I'm doing is I'm reforming the end of the axle by using two concave nail punches, one mounted vertically in a block of wood and clamped to my drill press bench, and the other one is in the drill truck, and I'm basically compressing and spinning at the same time, and it turns the end of the axle into a nice little mushroom end, and it flares it slightly so that the wheels don't fall off. And if you haven't got a drill, you can always use a small ball peen hammer to tap the end of the axle over. The hole in the side of the replica horses is not quite adequate to receive the end of the drawbar where it attaches the horses to the model. So I'm deciding to drill the hole out in the side of the horse just a little bit to allow me to fit the drawbar in there a little bit better than it was. And in actual fact, it's a force fit, and I don't really need any glue, but I do end up with a tiny little dollop of glue, as you'll see in a minute, just to hold them in place, to give them a little bit more rigidity. I'm really annoyed at myself now. I'm praying to hear the toot of the postie any moment roll up the driveway and deliver the missing pumps, but I don't think it's going to happen today. So I'm going ahead regardless, so at least I've got a video to put out. And maybe you can learn from my mistake and do a little bit more research on models before you start pulling them apart and repairing them. And if I'd paid a little bit more attention to those pictures, I might have noticed earlier on that there was something amiss from these models. You see, these are the only two models I have in my collection, so I had nothing to compare them with, and because of that, I assumed wrongly that the back end was complete. So anyway, I'm now securing the base using this colour match screw. Do it up nice and tight, that should be good. Now I've just noticed that when I was putting the wheels on at some stage, I've scratched the bottom there, so I shall give that a touch up. There's always a final touch up job on these before the final reveal, so that's nothing unusual. Here's some decals that I got for the side of the wagon. They should look good, and I'm cutting them out roughly just to make them easier to handle. And ordinarily, when I've ordered decals in the past, they have been cut by some means around the edges of the border of the decal itself. Well, today, just to throw me another curveball, these decals were not cut, or if they were, the depth was not cut deep enough. So I didn't realise until I put them on. At the moment, I'm thinking happy days. It's separated from the backing sheet. I shall now put it on the model. The end kept curling over, which was annoying. The end between my left finger and thumb there kept folding over the end of the backing sheet. Gave me a little bit of hassle. Anyway, it was only now when I'm draping it on the model and going for the full separation from the backing sheet, I'm thinking, what's going on here? It doesn't want to separate. And the reason is the tweezers are holding on to the decal, because the decal is actually oversized, larger than the border of the decal, if that makes sense. And so I put it on the model and I think to myself, this doesn't look right. I've done a few of these things in the past and it just doesn't look right. And of course, it turned out that the decal was larger than the area it was being placed on. And so the edges were overhanging, and I managed to remove it and cut them off. Ooh. To remove a wet decal from a model and trim it was not the solution that I would recommend. I would recommend ordering more decals and doing what I did for the second decal, which was take my time to trim it as close as possible to the design of the decal as I could, so there was no excess clear plastic overhanging the model. There was just one little bit I couldn't get, and it's at the rear of the top there. It was just overhanging at the rear slightly, and I had to resort to this Mr. Mark softer, which I don't often use. People rave about it, but I'm hoping it's going to shrink that decal and make it fit, or at least conceal the overlapping edges. Time will tell. As I said before, to keep these horses in position, and I apologise for the terrible focus there. It's my camera's going a little bit funny. I just put one blob, a little teardrop of glue in each hole, and then press it onto the drawbar. The reason I don't attach it to the drawbar is because if you did, when you put the horse on, you'd squeegee any excess along the drawbar and you'd notice it when the model was viewed. If the glue is in the hole, then when you attach it to the drawbar, you're actually pushing the excess further into the hole, so it doesn't squeegee out, in other words. Tiny things like that make a difference. Okay, we're nearly to where I want to be, except for the obvious missing piece at the back. So there's a fire, and here come the members of the team. Here come the team members. The driver first climbs up, then the pump operator, and then the hose holder, whatever you call them. They're all there on duty, ready and raring to go. They've probably had a good night's sleep. They've had a piece of toast and a cup of tea, and they're ready to go. Now, overall, this is a fantastically detailed model, and I do wish I had that last bit to put on there to showcase it in all its finery. But rest assured, when that part eventually comes, I will put it on the model and I shall show it in my next, or if not the next one after that video that I put out. So until then, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. If you have, please like, share and subscribe. And until next time, this is Marty saying thanks for watching and goodbye. Oh, yeah. Please separate.
Right, that's the handles on. Not too bad, do they?
Ah, yeah.